We have Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson has thrown his hat into the gubernatorial fray. First of all, Jonathan, I do want to get to talking about north of Charlotte, but what's the chatter within the Republican Party in North Carolina right now?
I think the conventional wisdom and the unconventional wisdom is that Mark Robinson will win this primary. Dale Folwell is one of the already announced candidates who's also running. Dale's a great guy, been a great treasurer for the state of North Carolina, formerly a legislator before that. Did a great job in the McCory administration. His biggest challenge is, will he have the money to get his message out? And he's running against one of the greatest communicators I've ever seen in my lifetime, in the form of Mark Robinson.
Conen, let's talk about Democrats. What's the chatter in there? Because Mark Robinson has said some things. And I mean, if you're a Democrat, it's troubling. If you're a Republican, it may not be so troubling. So I don't want to call him controversial in that sense. It depends on where you're coming from. What's the chatter among Democrats?
Well, prior to his announcement, he spent most of his time focusing on the culture wars, talking about being anti-LGBTQ, speaking about bans on books, making sure people are not woke. But since his announcement, he's trying to lean a little bit further and be more moderate, which was expected on that end. So we are trying to see the transformation of a Mark Robinson as a gubernatorial candidate, but we still expect more on the same on the campaign trail of him being extreme.
All right, so let's talk about north of Charlotte. You just mentioned some things about things he's said, but when you start getting into areas like north of Charlotte, people just care about growth. They care about traffic. They care about their kids' school. They care about taxes. Jonathan, let's talk about his appeal up there. And we just had a seat in Cabarrus went Democrat. So.
Right. Well, I think that I think this is somewhat relevant to the 2022 election cycle. I was working with Ted Budd, now U.S. Senator up in D.C. from Davie County originally. And during that campaign, lots of reporters wanted to tell us what the issues were going to be. They said January 6th was the issue. They said this extreme comment's an issue. They said an abortion is the issue. Then today in Axios Charlotte, which covers obviously Charlotte and the area north of Charlotte, they talk about last year set a record, I think, for increases in grocery prices. The first election ad that Ted Budd put out for his general election last year was focused on, guess what, grocery prices. And my point to this is that I think Mark Robinson will be talking about issues that most impact working families. I also think Mark Robinson's story, that of being, from, humble origins, factory worker, also from rural North Carolina, not from a major urban center. Those are things that are going to relate, that folks in Cabarrus County will relate to a lot more so than what Josh Stein's background is.
And Conen, talk about that. I mean, at the end of the day, and we've seen this even on the national stage, you have politicians that can say a lot of things where you're going, whoa. But at the end of the day, people are kind of like, oh, they said what they said, but you know what? They're great on taxes. How does Mark Robinson play with Democrats?
Not well, considering the fact that we have an outstanding candidate in Josh Stein who's running for governor. But specifically looking at Democrats and unaffiliates, this is an area of the state, being north of Charlotte in the Charlotte metro area, that is the top 20th in the country in terms of population, and the only two gubernatorial Republicans to be elected in the last 40 years have come from the Charlotte metro area. So Robinson's got to prove his case not only to Democrats and unaffiliates, he's got to remind some Republicans in the Charlotte metro area of who he is and what he stands for. And we don't have a really good tell of the tape with him being just lieutenant governor and understanding what his values are in terms of an actual voting record. So now is an opportunity for him to explain his own leadership and how he will govern as the top brass here in our state.
All right.
I got to point out those voters in Charlotte, they were paying record-setting grocery prices and record-setting inflation last year under Democrat leadership, including Governor Roy Cooper and President Joe Biden. That's the one thing that I think Conen and I can agree on here, is that the thing we're not talking about is the impact of the presidential race on the gubernatorial campaign, which will also, it's very hard to predict. And anyone says they can know what's going to happen there, they're lying to you.
All right, it's going to be fun to watch. So Morgan and Feltz and Morgan, thank you so much